This unit will take you through the process of summarizing information from a source. If you want to do an efficient summary of a text, then using sensible reading strategies will be very helpful. You can find some useful resources for this in the Blackboard site for this module. Writing summaries of relevant journal articles, textbooks, and other texts is an important part of writing your own university assignments, whether they're critical summaries, essays, reports, literature reviews, annotated bibliographies, and so on. First, as with paraphrasing, you have to recognize that your purpose and the original author's may be different, and that this will influence the transformation. Second, you need to find the salient information in the source. In other words, identify the relevant parts of the original text to transform into a summary. Third, you need to work out what the author's attitude is in the text and decide whether and how you will represent this in your summary. Next, you need to make clear which are your opinions and comments and which are the original author's. Fifth, when you're summarizing, it is often to survey a field of study, and you'll have to group your summaries together. We'll see an example in a moment. Of course, the whole point of a summary is to make it shorter. To do this, you have to look for key ideas and generalizations rather than detail. Sometimes your summary can be extreme. A whole journal article or two or three compressed into a single sentence. The next slide shows an example. You'll notice that in this example up to 2 pieces of research at a time have been cited using a referencing system that involves numbering. You'll also see that the grouping of citations relates to a single idea that the writers, Beale and Gipp, wanted to focus on. What you can't see here is the full reference list for each of these numbers. The reference list appears at the end of the publication. The referencing system used here is the IEEE system, commonly used in computer science fields. Note that this may not be the one that you need to use. If it was done using the APA or Harvard systems, for example, you'd see clusters of names and dates where the numbers are, but the principle is the same. In the next few slides, we work through 4 key strategies that you can use to help write effective summaries. Look again at the summary by Beale and Gipp. What 4 areas do Beale and Gipp want to focus on? You can pause the presentation for a moment while you read. The 4 areas, data overlap, coverage of the literature, suitability, and reliability, are the ones that Beale and Gibb wanted to focus on. So they've summarized the research literature that relates to each of these areas. Their summaries are very much reduced versions of what was in the research literature and are indicated by very succinct words and phrases to label the 4 areas. Someone else, writing with a different focus, may have summarized completely different sections of the research literature. Remember that this is an example of summaries made by very experienced writers. To do this type of summary well, you need to be able to analyze information carefully. Also, many of your summaries may be a little longer than the Beale and Gipp examples. The ways in which the writer of the original text has structured it, and your purpose in summarizing it, also influence where you might locate salient information to summarize. If, for example, you're mainly interested in how different experimental designs have been used to understand a particular problem, you would find the most salient or relevant information in the methodology section of the original texts. If you have a more general purpose, for example, you want to understand the main points that the original text is making, then you can also use the headings and subheadings and the paragraph structures to help identify the salient information to use. For more information about how journal articles are structured and how this can help you locate salient information, look for the resources on the Blackboard site for this module. When we talk about attitude, we mean the academic judgments or evaluations that an author has made. These may be positive or negative judgments. There are different practices in different disciplines, with writers in the humanities expressing these attitudes more frequently than those in STEM disciplines, that is, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics disciplines. This is an example of writing from a STEM discipline. You should be able to locate words that show that the authors have a particular attitude or attach a particular value towards the information they have provided. See if you can locate any indication of the author's attitude. You can pause the presentation to read the text. The writers use evaluative vocabulary to indicate their attitude. Once you have identified the attitude of the writer of the original text, you need to decide whether or not you represent that in your summary. This decision is influenced by your purpose in providing the summary. Attitude is often indicated in the reporting verb. That is the verb that introduces the summary. In this example, Beale and Gipp chose the reporting verb warn. You can clearly recognize the difference in attitude represented by verbs such as claim, argue, deny, propose, and so on. Neutral reporting verbs include report, state, and many more. In this example, Beale and Gipp distinguished their text from the research they were summarizing by using references after each of the 4 points they made to indicate that these ideas had come from other writers. Alternatively, they could have named the authors and used reporting verbs, or such expressions as according to Smith, and so on. One strategy you can use to make small reductions in word numbers is to combine sentences. In this example, changing concentrated into a noun in the first sentence allows a noun group to form around it. The new noun group is the growing concentration of the population in cities, and this becomes the subject of the second sentence, and 2 sentences can now be reduced to 1. Look at the source text here and the summary. What changes can you observe? Again, you can pause the presentation while you read. In this example, the sentence, urbanization is a process whereby an increasing proportion of the population becomes concentrated into larger cities, has been changed to a shorter noun phrase, the growing concentration of population in the cities. Non-essential information, like associated with modern man, has been eliminated. The detail in the last sentence of the source has been dropped, and the core meaning has been included in the single sentence of the summary, although its causes vary. Okay, now you can complete the summarizing quiz.